Hello and welcome to my office. These Darwin's Medicine seminars are made for strategists who work in pharma, medtech and other life sciences industries. They're based on my published articles, and if you'd like a copy of this or any of my articles, then either email me or browse my website where you can find over 300 of my publications. So let's begin. The first seminar in this series about glocalization was the Glocalization Challenge, which is the need to adapt to local market conditions while sticking to global strategy. In the second seminar in the series, called Glocalization Choice, I addressed the first part of that challenge, which is how to allocate resources, the right kind of resources and the right amount of resources to the right markets. In the third seminar in the series, I'm going to look at the second part of the Glocalization Challenge, which is about how to adapt to the market conditions of the countries that you've chosen to target. And then next, in the last in the series, I'll talk about how life science companies learn from and improve their glocalization. The most striking finding of my research is that most pharmaceutical companies take what is called an isomorphic approach to glocalization. In other words, they copy what they see others doing and they call it adopting best practice. In fact, there's rarely any evidence that what they're emulating is best practice, and even if it were, this isomorphic behaviour ignores the fact that there are important differences between companies' goals, strategies and cultures. When executing global strategies in local markets, isomorphic behaviour is usually very minimalist. That is, it begins with making essential changes, for example, to meet local language, regulatory, reimbursement and other market access requirements. But it ends with minor tweaks to marketing communications, such as adapting the mix to local media or changing the imagery to reflect local use. In other words, isomorphic adaptation of global strategy is usually limited to the two E's, the essential and the easy. This minimalist approach is necessary but not sufficient for success. It fails to create a compelling customer preference because it neglects the three key factors that make each market different from the others, even different from neighbouring markets. It neglects the competitive environment, it neglects market heterogeneity, and it neglects the beyond-the-pill needs of the targeted market segments, which I discussed in the second seminar in this series. Many, not all, but many companies are naive and isomorphic in their localization behaviour. In my research, I've found a few exemplary companies, the ones that I call the astute globalizers, who pay attention to these three neglected factors by developing three new habits for competitive analysis, for market segmentation, and for value proposition design. This figure summarises the differences between astute and naive companies, and in the next three sections I'm going to describe these three important habits and explain how they enable more effective glocalization. When I study naive globalizers, the definition of competitors is any firm that is selling competitive products. That is, competitors are those who compete for your market share. But this is strategically narrow-minded, and astute globalizers take a much wider view. You see, to them, a competitor is anyone who wants to drink from the same pool of profit in the marketplace. According to that framing, competitive pressures can come from many directions. For example, in many Asia-Pacific primary care markets, traditional remedies are as much of a rival as more obvious direct competitors. And in mature markets, large customers such as insurers or healthcare providers may create the most significant pressure on profits. What makes this habit of pooling competitors valuable is that whilst the global strategy usually includes a positioning against direct similar competitors, it often disregards the blend of substitutes, new entrants, buyers and suppliers that create the unique competitive conditions of the targeted market. So, the habit of thinking of your competitors as those who drink from your market's profit pool, and not just those who compete for your market share, is the first big difference between naive and astute globalizers. It's a necessary first step in adapting the global strategy to local markets in a way that creates competitive advantage. Even when the clinical indication is the same, patients differ in their needs, prescribers differ in their motivations, and payers differ in their attitudes. How firms understand and adapt to this three-dimensional heterogeneity is the second big difference between naive and astute glocalizers. Naive glocalizers slavishly follow the market segmentation in the global brand plans, with little or no adjustment for local conditions. Now, this is easy, but it comes at the cost of reduced competitiveness because it ignores the subtle differences in local market segmentation. In other words, the brand plans of naive globalizers often use the global market segments even when they know them to be poor approximations of the local reality. Astute glocalizers use global market segmentation as a starting point. If the global segmentation is based on clinical criteria, for example, they add non-clinical patient attributes, such as adherence behaviours or engagement with treatment decisions. Then they add in the heterogeneity of prescribers and professionals, usually also a combination of tangible and intangible drivers. And finally, they overlay the heterogeneity of payers, which exists often both at national level, for instance insured versus out of pocket, and account level, for instance value and price-driven local formularies. This approach is called contextual segmentation because it describes the complete context of the prescribing or usage decision. And if you'd like to know more about contextual segmentation, then I have another seminar on that subject. This habit of contextual segmentation requires a deep market insight and the courage to tell head office that their view is insufficiently nuanced for the local market. But its advantage is that it gives astute localizers an edge over their naive rivals because it puts astute localizers in a position to create a stronger and much more compelling value proposition. The differences between naive and astute localizers are most obvious in their habits around creating and delivering value propositions. Naive globalizers focus on essential activities of gaining regulatory and reimbursement access and easy activities of adapting marketing communications to the local media and culture. But in an increasingly digital omnichannel world, even this is becoming a relatively minor task. In other words, naive glocalizers do little more than translate the global strategy's clinical claims into local language and regulations. And this is all they can do because they haven't understood the local competitive environment or the local market segmentation. But the astute localizers have understood the local market conditions better, and this allows them to build on the core value proposition that comes from global strategy in two steps. First, they add a layer of extended value, for example, risk-sharing price deals to address payers' conservativeness or educational programs that address prescribers' fear of misprescribing. Then they add a layer of augmented value, for example, their opinion leader programs address the self-actualization needs of key professionals, and their branding messages address the reassurance need of the local laggard segments. It's this extended, augmented value proposition that leads to their target segments having a perception of superior value, and that allows firms to win share and avoid the price pressure that is faced by naive globalizers. When I think of the differences between astute and naive globalizers, I like to think of a quote by Aristotle, who said, not in his words, that globalizers are the sum of their habits. Naive globalizers' habits limit them to the essential and easy, and that means that they take a narrow view of the competition, they adopt global segments without local adaptation, and they simply echo the core value proposition that comes from the global strategy. Astute globalizers' habits use global strategies as a starting point, which means they compete for the profit pool, not market share, and to do so, they work hard to understand the rich, multi-dimensional, contextual segmentation that makes their market unique. They use this to build extended, augmented value propositions, and they create value in the eyes of the customer. These differences have three consequences that astute leaders in the life sciences industry grasp, but naive leaders don't. First, it means that astute globalizers create competitive advantage and shareholder value compared to naive globalizers. Second, it means that local affiliates have a much bigger, more value-adding role than merely executing headquarters instructions. And finally, it means that local affiliates can be a rich source of organisational learning for the wider global organisation. And that's that last point that I'll turn to in Seminar 4. Thanks for joining this seminar. If you found it useful, then please like, subscribe and share on LinkedIn with your colleagues. And if you'd like to know more about my research into strategy, business models and the evolution of the life sciences industry, then please get in touch and we can set up a virtual cup of tea.